Okay, so what we're going to do today is we are going to try to figure out why we needed to know how to factor quadratic trinomials. So remember, ax squared plus bx plus c is called a quadratic because of the power of 2, trinomial because there's 3 terms. We practiced factoring quadratic trinomial expressions a lot. And I never told you why we needed that skill, but I told you it's a skill we needed. Today we figure out why we need this skill. So, little review, little final exam review. If I told you that 3x plus 7 equaled 5, how would you solve for x? Take a second and solve for x on your own, and then pause the video. You can watch how I do it to make sure you know how to solve an equation like this. So the way I would solve this is I would start by subtracting 7. I do that from both sides, and I'm left with 3x equals negative 2. Next thing I do is I divide by 3, and the whole idea here is I'm getting x by itself. I now have x equals negative 2/3, and I'm done. Well, that's pretty easy when we have equations that look like this, because this is a linear equation, and with a linear equation, it's pretty easy to isolate x. But if we have a quadratic equation, x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0, it's a lot harder to isolate x. It's hard to isolate x because it's in multiple places. So don't write this down, but this is what a lot of kids will try to do. They'll subtract the 5x and the 6, and then they'll take the square root of both sides and say that x is equal to the x is equal to the square root of negative 5x minus 6. And then I ask, well, how the heck can we solve for x by having an x in our solution? So that doesn't work. So how are we going to solve how are we going to solve x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take that equation, x squared plus 5x plus 6, and for now, the only way we're going to be able to solve this equation is to see if we can factor this quadratic trinomial. Why factoring is so useful is it changes all of these things being added up to 2 things being multiplied together. Now, if 2 things multiply together to equal 0, we get to do this really great thing in math. If I told you that a times b was equal to 0, what do you know about a and b? You know one of them is 0. That's the only way in the world to multiply and get a 0 is to have one of your numbers equal 0. So over here, if I can factor x squared plus 5x plus 6, and I can, to x plus 2 and x plus 3, what I can say now is this number times this number is 0. And that means one of 2 things. That means this number here, x plus 2 equals 0, or that means this number here, x plus 3 equals 0. There's no other way for these 2 numbers to multiply to get 0 unless one of them is 0. I solve these 2 equations independently. I get x equals negative 2. Over here I get x equals negative 3, and those are my 2 solutions. So a little different than linear equations, with quadratic equations, we get 2 solutions. The fact that there's a 2 here and I get 2 solutions is not a coincidence. That's always going to be true. So let's try another example and hit some other main points here of solving quadratic equations. A lot of times you'll get a quadratic equation that looks like this. 3x squared plus 7x minus 5 equals 2x squared plus 2x. plus 2x, and I want to make sure this works, minus 9. I think this will work. So we can't just try to factor this side and factor this side. If you look at the previous example, we were able to solve it because we knew it was one number times another equals 0. So my first step is to set this equation equal to 0. Basically what that means is move everything on this side to the other side, or move everything on the left-hand side to the right-hand side, whichever one you want to do. I will tell you it's a lot easier if your x squared is positive. So I'm going to subtract 2x squared from both sides of the equation. I'm then going to subtract 2x from both sides. I'm also going to add 9 to both sides. So notice I'm working on both sides of the equal sign. I got rid of all of these terms over here by doing the opposite operation. Subtracted 2x squared, subtracted 2x, and added 9. Now over on the right hand side, if I did it correctly, all of these should cancel, leaving me a 0. On the right hand side, I collect like terms. I get 3x squared minus 2x squared is x squared. I get 7x minus 2x is 5x. I now get negative 5 plus 9 is 4. And now I have a quadratic equation that's equal to 0, and I can check to see if the left-hand side factors. There are quadratic equations that when we set equal to 0 will not factor, and we can't solve those yet. We have a way of solving them, but right now we're just practicing by factoring. So, what are the factors of 4 that add to 5? Yes, 1 and 4. Because this is a plus, it's plus plus or minus minus. We know it's a plus plus. Now I set both of those parentheses equal to 0. I solve each equation independently and I get that x equals negative 1 or x equals negative 4. Those are my two solutions. If I go back to the very original problem up here and I plug in these values, negative 1 squared is 1, 1 times 3 is 3. Negative 1 times 7 is negative 7, minus 5. What is 3 minus 7 minus 5? That's equal to negative 9. Over here I plug in a negative 1. I get 2 times negative 1 squared, which is 2. 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2. And then minus 9. What is 2 minus 2 minus 9? Negative 9. And I got negative 9 equals negative 9. If I plug in negative 4, negative 4 squared is 16. 16 times 3 is 48. Then I subtract 7 times negative 4, which is 28. And then I subtract 5. 48 minus 28 is 20. 20 minus 5 is 15. I plug in negative 4 over here. Negative 4 squared is 16. 2 times 16 is 32. 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. Minus 9. 32 minus 8 is 24. 24 minus 9 is 15. And I got 15 equals 15. So I'm pretty sure I got the right answer. So this concept is solving quadratic equations by factoring. The way we're going to do that is the first thing we're going to do is set the quadratic equation equal to 0. So move things from the right side to the left or from the left side to the right, collect like terms, set it equal to 0. Second thing we're going to do is see if the quadratic factors. If it does, factor it. If it doesn't, you're going to have to use another method. That's what we'll learn later this unit. For now, set the two factors equal to 0 and solve. Never a bad idea to check your solution, but not required. The last thing I'll tell you is sometimes students will see something like this. X squared plus 5x minus 6 equals negative 12. They'll get so excited to see that there are factors of 6 that subtract to 5, and they'll factor over here, but it doesn't equal 0, so this doesn't work. If two numbers multiply to get negative 12, it doesn't tell you anything about these numbers. There are an infinite number of possibilities to multiply to get negative 12. We're probably thinking of a lot of the easy ones, like 1 times negative 12, or negative 2 times 6. But there's also 36 times negative 1/3 if you wanted to try that. So what you would have to do in this case is you would have to first set it equal to 0 by adding 12 to both sides. Once you do that, you get x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Now you can factor and set it equal to 0 and see if there are factors that multiply, factors of 6 that add to 5. X with a 2, x with a 3, plus, plus. And now you can solve. Have a good rest of your weekend. I'll see you Monday. Peace.